My name is Rachel, 29 years old, and I never expected a simple family dinner would unravel everything. When Dad casually asked if the money he sent helped with my rent, I froze mid-bite. What money? I asked, genuinely confused. The silence that followed was deafening. Dad looked puzzled, then concerned. I turned to Mom, whose face had drained of color. She could not even pretend. Her eyes darted around the room, avoiding contact with anyone. My name is Rachel, 29 years old, and I never expected a simple family dinner would unravel everything. When Dad casually asked if the money he sent helped with my rent, I froze mid-bite. What money? I asked, genuinely confused. The silence that followed was deafening. Dad looked puzzled, then concerned. I turned to Mom, whose face had drained of color. She could not even pretend. Her eyes darted around the room, avoiding contact with anyone. That was the moment our family changed forever. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments, and please subscribe if family drama stories like mine resonate with you. Growing up, I always had a close relationship with my parents, though it was sometimes strained. My dad, Thomas, was the quiet, supportive type who worked long hours as an accountant to provide for us. Mom, Diane, was more controlling and extremely conscious about our family image in the suburban community of Glenview, Illinois, where we lived. Our house was always immaculate. Our clothes always designer brands, even when I suspected we could not really afford them. After graduating with my communications degree from Northwestern 4 years ago, I was determined to make it on my own in Chicago. I wanted to prove I could be independent, especially to my mother, who constantly questioned my choices. Finding work in my field proved harder than expected. Entry-level positions were scarce, and the competition was fierce. I bounced between temporary positions and freelance gigs, barely making enough to cover my expenses. I found an apartment in Wicker Park, not the safest area, but one I could almost afford. Each month was a juggling act between rent, utilities, student loan payments, and groceries. Sometimes I had to decide between electricity and food. I never told my parents about these struggles, especially not my mother, who would have used my financial difficulties as proof I should have majored in business, like she suggested. Despite my struggles, Sunday dinners at my parents' remained a sacred tradition. Every week I would drive the 20 miles from my apartment to their suburban home, put on a smile, and pretend everything was fine. I would talk about potential job opportunities rather than rejections and casually change the subject when Mom asked about my apartment. The truth was, things had gotten much worse recently. The marketing agency where I had finally landed a steady position had lost a major client and laid off their newest employees, including me. That had been 3 weeks ago, and I still had not told my parents. My savings were completely depleted, and the eviction notice taped to my door gave me 7 days to pay or vacate. 2 months before that fateful dinner, I had broken down during a rare one-on-one conversation with my father. We were sitting in his car after he had insisted on driving me home from a family birthday celebration. "Rachel, honey, is everything okay?" Dad had asked, noticing how quiet I had been all evening. Maybe it was the genuine concern in his voice, or maybe it was just the exhaustion of pretending everything was fine, but I found myself telling him some of the truth. "Work has been slow, Dad, and rent keeps going up. I am just stressed about money right now." Dad had nodded thoughtfully, his hands gripping the steering wheel, even though we were parked outside my apartment building. "Let me help you," he said finally, "just until you get back on your feet." Pride made me refuse. "I can handle it. I need to figure this out on my own." "Everyone needs help sometimes, Rach," he said gently. "There is no shame in that." I thanked him, but insisted I would be fine. He seemed to accept my decision, but the worry never left his eyes. We hugged goodbye, and I watched him drive away, feeling both relieved for having shared my burden and guilty for causing him concern. In the weeks that followed, things only got worse. My credit card was maxed out, my phone service was cut off for non-payment. I started skipping meals to save money. But every Sunday, I put on nice clothes, drove to my parents' house, and pretended everything was normal. The Sunday of the revelation began like any other. I arrived at my parents' Tudor-style home precisely at 5, the time Mom insisted we gather. My younger sister Kimberly was already there helping set the table. At 26, Kimberly had followed Mom's advice and become an accountant like Dad. She worked at his firm and lived in a nice condo our parents had helped her buy as a graduation present. The contrast between our lives was not lost on me. "Hey, sis," Kimberly said, giving me a quick hug. "You look thin. Are you eating enough?" "Just been busy," I said, forcing a smile. "New project at work." The lie came easily after months of practice. I helped her finish setting the table, arranging the cloth napkins in the perfect triangle fold Mom insisted upon. Everything in this house had to be just so. As I placed the water glasses, I noticed Mom seemed especially attentive today, asking repeatedly if I wanted more food, if I needed anything. It struck me as odd, but I brushed it off as motherly concern. Now I realized she was overcompensating for what she had done. What I did not know then, what I could not have imagined, was that the simple question Dad would ask over dessert would change everything I thought I knew about my family, especially my mother. The dining room in my parents' house had always been formal. Crystal chandelier, mahogany table, and china cabinet displaying wedding gifts never actually used. Mom insisted on using the good silverware every Sunday, unlike other families who saved it for holidays. "We should enjoy nice things while we can," she always said. I never questioned what that meant until later. Dinner that night was pot roast, my favorite. Mom had prepared all my preferred sides: 2 roasted potatoes, instead of mashed glazed carrots, and those buttery dinner rolls from the bakery downtown. In hindsight, the special treatment should have been a warning sign. The conversation flowed normally at first. Kimberly talked about a difficult client at the accounting firm. Dad discussed a new tax regulation that would affect his business clients. Mom bragged about her garden club winning first prize at the local competition. I contributed vague updates about work carefully constructed to sound positive without being specific. As Mom served apple pie for dessert, Dad cleared his throat and turned to me with a smile. "So Rachel did that money I sent help with the rent situation? I was worried when you told me about the increase." The fork stopped halfway to my mouth. Money. What money? Dad had offered to help 2 months ago, but I had refused. I never received anything from him. "What money?" I asked, genuinely confused. Dad looked equally confused now. "The $5,000 I transferred to your account 2 weeks ago. Did it not go through?" The room fell silent. $5,000. That would have solved all my immediate problems. It would have prevented the eviction notice, kept my phone on, allowed me to eat regular meals again. But I never saw a penny of it. "Dad, I never received any money," I said slowly, watching his expression change from confusion to concern. "That cannot be right," he insisted, putting down his fork. "I transferred it directly from my account to yours. I have the confirmation and everything." An uncomfortable feeling settled in my stomach. If Dad sent the money and I never received it, where did it go? Slowly, I turned to look at my mother. Diane Lambert had always been the picture of composure. Her blonde hair was always perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, her posture rigid. But in that moment, she seemed to collapse in on herself. Her face had drained of all color, and her hands trembled as she gripped her napkin. Dad's voice had a dangerous edge I had never heard before. "Do you know something about this?" Mom could not even meet his eyes. Instead, she stood abruptly, nearly knocking over her water glass. "Who wants coffee with their pie?" she asked, her voice unnaturally high. "I just bought that hazelnut blend you, like Thomas." The attempted subject change was so transparent, so desperate that even Kimberly gasped. "Mom," my sister whispered, "what did you do?" Mom's hands fluttered like trapped birds. "I do not know what everyone is getting so upset about. It is just a misunderstanding with the bank, I am sure." Dad stood now too, his 6-foot frame suddenly imposing. In all my life, I had never seen him angry with Mom. Frustrated, sometimes exasperated often, but never angry. Until now. Diane, did you take the money I sent to Rachel? The bluntness of the question seemed to physically hit my mother. She took a step back, bumping into the china cabinet. A delicate teacup rattled on its saucer. I was going to give it to her, Mom finally said, her voice small. I just needed to borrow it temporarily. The confession hung in the air like smoke. Dad looked like he had been slapped. Kimberly's mouth formed a perfect O of shock, and I felt something inside me break. Borrow it, I repeated. Without telling anyone. While I am about to be evicted from my apartment. This last part slipped out before I could stop it. I had not intended to reveal how dire my situation was. Evicted Dad turned to me, his anger momentarily replaced by concern. Rachel, why didn't you tell me it was that bad? Because I was handling it, I said, tears threatening. Or trying to. And apparently you did try to help, but I couldn't finish the sentence. My own mother had intercepted money meant to keep her daughter from homelessness. The betrayal was too enormous to process. I think we all need to calm down, Mom said, attempting to regain control of the situation. This is being blown completely out of proportion. Out of proportion, Dad's voice rose. You stole money from our daughter. I did not steal anything, Mom snapped back. The money was going to be returned. I just needed it for an important payment. What payment could be more important than keeping your daughter housed? Kimberly demanded, finally finding her voice. Mom's eyes darted around the room, looking anywhere but at us. It is complicated. You would not understand. The perfect family dinner had descended into chaos. I felt sick, betrayed, and suddenly very tired. Without a word, I pushed back from the table and headed for the stairs. Rachel, wait, Dad called after me. I need a minute, I replied, not turning back. I climbed the stairs to my old bedroom, the one Mom had converted to a guest room the day after I moved out for college. Nothing in that room belonged to me anymore. Even that felt symbolic now. The guest room that used to be mine still held traces of my childhood if you knew where to look. The slight dent in the wall where I had thrown a softball during an indoor game I was not supposed to be playing. The faint outline on the ceiling where glow-in-the-dark stars had once been adhered. But everything else was different. Neutral beige paint had replaced my purple walls. A generic landscape hung where my bulletin board used to be. I sat on the edge of the perfectly made bed, my mind racing. The $5,000 Dad sent would have covered my overdue rent of $2,300, the electric bill of $187, my phone bill of $92, and still left enough to get me through until I found another job. Instead, I was facing eviction in 7 days with exactly $27.14 in my checking account. My mother had taken that lifeline. My own mother. A soft knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. Dad entered without waiting for a response. His face looked older suddenly, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. I brought proof, he said quietly, holding out his phone. I want you to see that I really did try to help. The bank app on his phone showed the transfer dated exactly 2 weeks ago, $5,000 from Thomas Lambert to Rachel Lambert. I never questioned if you sent it, Dad, I said. I just never received it. Dad sat beside me, the bed dipping under his weight. I keep separate accounts for household expenses, personal spending, and savings, he explained. Your mother has access to the household account, but not my personal or savings accounts. When you told me about your financial struggles, I transferred money from my personal account to yours. I wanted to help without making a big deal of it. But I never got it, I repeated, still struggling to understand. Dad sighed heavily. I think I know what happened. Your mother must have seen the transfer notification on my phone or computer, and somehow redirected it. The implication was staggering. How could she even do that? She would need access to my account. Dad rubbed his temples. Remember when you first opened your bank account in high school? Your mother insisted on being a joint account holder because you were a minor. A cold realization washed over me. But that was years ago. I opened my own account after college. Are you sure you closed the old joint account? Dad asked. I tried to remember the details of that time. Moving to my apartment, starting my first job, the excitement of independence. Had I formally closed that old account, or had I just opened a new one and stopped using the joint account? I need to check my online banking, I said. Dad handed me his tablet. I logged into my bank account and checked the account details. There it was, Rachel Lambert, primary account holder, Diane Lambert, joint account holder. An account I rarely used anymore, but had never officially closed. She still has access, I whispered. With trembling fingers, I navigated to the transaction history. There it was 2 weeks ago. Transfer from Thomas Lambert, $5,000. And the very same day, transfer to account ending in 4,832 $5,000. What's account 4,832? I asked. Dad's expression darkened. I don't know, but we're gonna find out. He took the tablet from me and logged into his own online banking. After several minutes of searching through accounts, his face went pale. It's a personal shopping account your mother opened last year, he said, his voice hollow. She told me it was for household expenses and asked me to set up a small monthly transfer to it. I had no idea. He turned the screen toward me. The account showed multiple purchases from high-end department stores, jewelry, retailers, and designer boutiques. Thousands of dollars spent on luxury items far beyond what our family income should allow. Dad, I think Mom might have a shopping addiction, I said gently. He nodded slowly. I'm starting to see that. But taking money meant for you when you're about to be evicted, that's beyond an addiction. That's... He couldn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. We both knew what it was, a betrayal of the worst kind. Has she done this before? I asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. Dad stared at the transaction history. I don't know, but I'm going to find out. He started scrolling through months of banking records, his accountant's mind quickly spotting patterns I would have missed. There are regular transfers to accounts I don't recognize. Small enough not to raise immediate concerns, but frequent enough to add up to significant amounts. My mind flashed to childhood memories. Mom coming home with shopping bags she would hide in the trunk before bringing them inside. The credit card bills she always insisted on handling herself. The occasional arguments about money that would stop abruptly when Kimberly or I entered the room. I think this has been going on for a long time, I said quietly. Dad nodded, his expression grim. I think you're right. And now we need answers. We sat in silence for a moment, both processing the magnitude of what we had discovered. Then Dad stood squaring his shoulders. Let's go downstairs. Your mother has some explaining to do. As we descended the stairs, I felt a strange mix of emotions, anger at the betrayal, sadness for my mother's obvious problems, and an odd sense of relief that the truth was finally coming to light. Whatever happened next, the facade of our perfect family had cracked beyond repair. And maybe that wasn't entirely a bad thing. The living room was silent when Dad and I returned downstairs. Mom sat rigidly on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped in her lap, looking like a student, awaiting punishment. Kimberly paced by the fireplace, her accountant's mind probably running the same calculations Dad's had. Diane, Dad said, his voice unnaturally calm. We need to talk about what you've done. Mom's chin lifted defiantly. I told you I was going to give the money to Rachel. I just needed it temporarily. For what I asked. What was so important that you took money meant to prevent me from being homeless? Mom's eyes darted around the room, not settling on any of us. There was a sale at Nordstrom. Designer items at 70% off. It was an investment opportunity. An investment. Kimberly exploded. In what more clothes you never wear, while your daughter gets evicted. Dad held up the tablet displaying the account transactions. It wasn't just Nordstrom, was it, Diane? It's Tiffany's, Saks, Bloomingdale's. Thousands of dollars every month. Mom's face flushed. You had no right to look through my personal accounts. Personal accounts funded with money you took from our daughter, Dad countered. Money I sent to help her keep her apartment. Mom stood suddenly, smoothing her skirt in a nervous gesture I had seen countless times. You all are overreacting. Rachel is a grown woman who should be able to support herself by now. If she had listened to me about her career choices, she wouldn't need handouts. The casual cruelty of her words stunned me into silence. Dad, however, was not deterred. This isn't about Rachel's career choices. This is about you stealing money that wasn't yours to take. Stealing is a very harsh word, Mom said, her voice rising. I prefer to think of it as reallocating family resources. Was it reallocation when you took the money from my graduation cards too? Kimberly asked suddenly. All eyes turned to my sister. Mom went pale. What are you talking about? Dad asked. Kimberly crossed her arms. When I graduated high school, Grandma called to make sure I received the $500 she put in my card. I never saw that money. Mom said Grandma must be confused. But now I'm thinking Grandma wasn't confused at all. Mom sank back onto the sofa. That was different. You were too young to manage that much money responsibly. And what about the checks from Uncle Fred that never made it to my account? I added, memory after memory suddenly clicking into place. Or the money Aunt Susan always sent for our birthdays that somehow never reached us. Those were small amounts, Mom said dismissively. Nothing worth making a fuss about. Dad looked stricken. How long has this been going on, Diane? How many times have you intercepted money meant for our daughters? Mom's defensive posture suddenly collapsed. Her shoulders slumped, and for the first time I saw past the perfect exterior to the troubled woman beneath. I don't know, she whispered. It started small. A birthday check here, a Christmas gift there. Then it got easier. Easier to steal from your own children. Kimberly's voice cracked with emotion. You don't understand what it's like, Mom cried. The pressure to keep up appearances, to have the right clothes, the right accessories. People judge you on these things. They always have. No one is judging you on your handbag, Mom, I said, frustration mounting. And even if they were, how is that more important than your daughter's housing security? I was going to fix it, Mom insisted. I just needed more time. Time for what Dad asked, to win the lottery, to suddenly develop a conscience. Mom's face hardened. Don't you dare take that tone with me, Thomas. Not when you've been oblivious all these years. Some accountant, you are not even noticing money disappearing from your own accounts. The accusation hung in the air. Dad looked like he'd been physically struck. You're right, he said finally. I should have paid more attention. I trusted you, and that was clearly a mistake. Mom's eyes widened at his words. I don't think she had expected him to agree with her. How bad is it, Diane? Dad asked. The whole truth now. How much debt are we in because of your shopping? Mom's silence was answer enough. I need to see all the credit card statements, Dad continued. Every account, every card. Now. That's private, Mom protested weakly. Not anymore, Dad said firmly. Not after this. While Dad and Mom continued their standoff, Kimberly moved to sit beside me. Are you really being evicted? She asked quietly. I nodded, too exhausted to maintain the pretense of success I'd worked so hard to project. 7 days. I lost my job 3 weeks ago. I've been living on ramen and tap water. That money Dad sent would have saved me. Kimberly squeezed my hand. Why didn't you tell us? Pride, I guess, I admitted. I wanted to prove I could make it on my own. especially to Mom, who always said my degree was useless. You can stay with me until you find a new place, Kimberly offered immediately. Before I could respond, Mom's voice rose again. Fine, you want to know everything, I'll show you. She stormed to the antique secretary desk in the corner of the living room, yanking open drawers and pulling out stacks of envelopes. Credit card statements, store cards, loan documents. She threw them on the coffee table with surprising force. There, are you happy now? Yes, I've been shopping. Yes, I've taken money that wasn't technically mine. But I've been suffocating in this life, playing the perfect wife and mother, while none of you noticed I was drowning. The outburst left us all momentarily speechless. Dad recovered first, calmly gathering the scattered statements. This isn't about shopping, Diane. This is about trust and honesty. You didn't just take money from me, you took it from our daughters. You let Rachel face eviction rather than admit you had a problem. Mom's anger deflated as quickly as it had erupted. Tears welled in her eyes. I never meant for it to go this far. It just happened. One purchase led to another, and then I couldn't stop. The new things made me feel better, but only for a little while. Then I needed more. Under different circumstances, I might have felt compassion for her obvious struggle, but watching her cry while I faced homelessness made it impossible to summon sympathy. I can't do this right now, I said, standing abruptly. I need to go. Rachel, please. Mom reached for my arm. I'll make it right. I promise. I pulled away from her touch. How will you get me my job back, pay my rent, restore my trust in you? Some things can't be fixed with promises, Mom. Dad stood as well. Rachel, you don't have to leave. We can figure this out together. But I was already heading for the door, grabbing my purse and jacket. I need space to process this. I'll call you tomorrow, Dad. As I reached for the doorknob, Mom called out, Rachel, wait. I'm sorry. I paused, not turning around. I know you are Mom, but right now that's not enough. The drive back to my apartment was a blur of tears and anger. The family I thought I knew had been an illusion. My mother, who had always preached about responsibility and good choices, had been stealing from her own children, and I had been too proud to ask for help when I really needed it. By the time I parked outside my building, the weight of everything threatened to crush me. The eviction notice greeted me as I unlocked my door, a stark reminder that betrayal had real consequences. In 7 days, I would have nowhere to live, and somehow that felt like the least of my problems. 3 days after the disastrous family dinner, I sat in my nearly empty apartment, surrounded by half-packed boxes. My phone, recently reconnected after Kimberly paid the bill, buzzed with a message from my best friend Jessica. Open up. I brought lunch and wine. I smiled despite everything. Jessica had been my roommate in college and remained my closest confidant. She was the only person outside my family who knew the full extent of my financial troubles and now my family drama. When I opened the door, Jessica stood there with a pizza box in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. Her curly hair was pulled into a messy bun, and her expression was one of determined cheerfulness. You look terrible, she announced, pushing past me into the apartment. But that's what friends and carbohydrates are for. Thanks, I think I replied, closing the door behind her. Jessica surveyed the boxes scattered around the small living room. So you're really moving in with Kimberly? I nodded, grabbing paper towels since my plates were already packed, temporarily. Until I find another job and save enough for a security deposit somewhere. Jessica poured wine into 2 coffee mugs, the only drinking vessels still unpacked. And, how are you feeling about everything with your mom? I accepted the mug she offered, taking a long sip before answering. Honestly, I'm still processing. 1 minute I'm furious, the next I'm worried about her. Then I remember I'm being evicted because of what she did, and I'm right back to furious. Both reactions are valid, Jessica said, handing me a slice of pizza. What she did was objectively terrible, But it also sounds like she has some serious issues. Dad called yesterday, I said. He's been going through all their finances. It's worse than we thought. How bad? I picked at the cheese on my pizza. Mom has 7 maxed out credit cards Dad didn't know about. She's been opening store accounts in his name. There's even a personal loan she somehow got using their home equity as collateral. Jessica's eyes widened. Holy crap. Yeah, I sighed. Dad estimates they're about $70,000 in debt from her shopping alone. That's not just shopping, Rach. That's addiction territory. I nodded. Dad's convinced her to see a therapist who specializes in compulsive spending. First appointment is tomorrow. And how's your dad handling it? I thought about my father's voice on the phone, strained but determined. He's devastated. Not just about the money, but the betrayal. Finding out your partner of 30 years has been lying to you about something so fundamental, it's shaken everything he thought he knew. Jessica leaned forward. Are they going to stay together? I don't know, I admitted. Dad says they're taking it one day at a time. He's moved into the guest room for now. We ate in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation settling around us. You know what? I still don't understand, I said finally. Why me? Why take the money Dad specifically sent to help me? She had to know I was struggling. Jessica considered this. Maybe because you've always been so independent, you never asked for help, so taking from you might have seemed less likely to be discovered. Maybe I conceded, though the explanation didn't bring much comfort. Have you talked to your mom since that night? Jessica asked. I shook my head. She's called and texted, but I'm not ready. I keep thinking about all the times money mysteriously disappeared. Birthday checks from relatives that must have gotten lost in the mail. The graduation money from Grandma that Mom said was put into a college fund that never materialized. You think this has been going on that long? I know it has, I said firmly. Dad's been doing some digging. Remember my great-aunt Eleanor, who always sent me $20 for my birthday? Dad found old bank records showing she actually sent $100 every year. Mom pocketed the difference. Jessica whistled low. That's systematic. And it gets worse, I continued. Remember how I always said I had the cheapest senior prom dress? Turns out Dad gave Mom $400 for my dress. She bought me a $99 clearance gown and kept the rest. That's beyond messed up, Jessica said, refilling our mugs. But it also sounds like she's been struggling with this issue for decades. That doesn't excuse what she did, but it might help explain it. I leaned back against the couch, suddenly exhausted. The thing is, Jess, I might have understood if she'd just been honest. If she'd said, I have a problem, I need help, I would have been there for her. It's the lies and manipulation that hurt the most. So, what happens now? Jessica asked. Tomorrow, I'm meeting Dad at Lighthouse Coffee to go over some financial records he's found. He's trying to piece together how long this has been going on and how much money has been diverted over the years. Jessica nodded. And then I guess we figure out what a relationship with my mother looks like going forward, if there even is one. The next morning, I arrived at Lighthouse Coffee 15 minutes early, my stomach in knots. Dad was already there, a manila folder on the table beside his coffee cup. He looked tired with shadows under his eyes and a day's worth of stubble on his usually clean-shaven face. Hey, Dad, I said, sliding into the chair across from him. Rachel, he attempted a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Thanks for meeting me. How are things at home? I asked cautiously. Dad sighed, tense. Your mother's first therapy appointment is this afternoon. The therapist recommended a financial counselor as well. We have a joint appointment next week. That's good, right? That she's getting help. It's a start, Dad acknowledged. But we have a long road ahead. Trust, once broken, isn't easily repaired. I nodded, knowing all too well how that felt. What did you want to show me? Dad opened the folder, revealing neatly organized bank statements and handwritten notes. I've been reconstructing our financial history, looking for patterns, unexplained withdrawals, money that should have gone to you or Kimberly. He pushed several pages toward me. These are birthday and Christmas checks from relatives over the years. The highlighted amounts show what was sent versus what you actually received. I scanned the pages feeling sick. Hundreds of dollars every year systematically diverted. And this dad continued showing me another document. Is a trust your grandmother established for your college education? $10,000 that should have been available to you when you started Northwestern? I never knew about any trust, I said, stunned. Mom told me Grandma couldn't afford to help with college. Dad's expression darkened. She lied. Your grandmother specifically set aside money for both you and Kimberly. Kimberly's went to her condo down payment as intended. Yours disappeared. Into Mom's shopping accounts. Most likely, Dad confirmed. I'm still tracing the money trail. I don't understand how she could do this, I said, fighting back tears. I worked 2 jobs during college. I took out loans. I'm still paying off. All while money that was meant for me was funding her shopping addiction. Dad reached across the table, covering my hand with his. I failed you, Rachel. I should have been more attentive to the finances. I never questioned when your mother said she would handle the gifts from relatives. I trusted her completely. This isn't your fault, Dad. I'm your father. It was my job to protect you. I didn't see what was happening right under my nose. We sat in silence for a moment, both processing the magnitude of the deception. So, what now? I finally asked. Dad straightened his shoulders. Now we rebuild. Your mother gets the help she needs. I make sure our finances are transparent and properly managed. And most importantly, we make things right with you and Kimberly. Dad, you don't have to. Yes, I do, he interrupted firmly. I can't undo the past, but I can make sure you're okay now. I've already transferred $5,000 directly to your personal account, not the joint one. I've also set up an appointment with my bank to remove your mother's access to any of your accounts. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The money would prevent my immediate homelessness, giving me time to find a new job. Thank you, I said simply. Dad nodded. It's a start. We'll figure out the rest as we go. As I left the coffee shop, I felt simultaneously lighter and heavier. The immediate financial crisis was averted, but the emotional aftermath of my mother's betrayal remained. How do you reconcile the mother you thought you knew with the person who systematically stole from you for years? It was a question I wasn't sure I would ever fully answer. 1 week after my coffee meeting with Dad, I found myself sitting in a small cafe near my mother's therapy office. I had finally agreed to meet her alone after she had completed 3 sessions with her new therapist. Dad had encouraged the meeting, saying that while reconciliation might be a long way off, communication was a necessary first step. I arrived early, choosing a table in the corner where we would have some privacy. My hands fidgeted with the paper napkin, folding and unfolding it into increasingly smaller squares. When the bell above the door chimed, I looked up to see my mother enter. She looked different somehow. The designer outfit and perfect makeup were gone, replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. Her hair was pulled back in a casual ponytail, rather than her usual elaborate style. She spotted me and approached hesitantly, as if unsure of her welcome. Rachel, she said softly, thank you for meeting me. I gestured to the chair across from me. Have a seat. Mom sat down, placing her purse carefully on the floor beside her. An awkward silence stretched between us. Finally, she spoke. I don't know where to begin. How about with the truth? I suggested, my voice steadier than I felt. The whole truth for once. Mom nodded, taking a deep breath. I've been seeing Dr. Winters, a therapist who specializes in compulsive spending and financial infidelity. She's helping me understand that what I've been doing isn't just bad budgeting, it's a genuine disorder. A disorder that led you to steal from your own daughter. I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. Mom flinched, but didn't look away. I deserve that. And yes, it led me to do things I never thought I was capable of. Things that shame me deeply now, that I'm beginning to see clearly. How long has this been going on, I asked, though I already knew the answer from Dad's investigation. Longer than I want to admit, Mom said quietly. It started small after you were born. Postpartum depression, though it wasn't diagnosed then. Shopping made me feel better. In control. The more stressed I felt, the more I shopped. And taking money meant for Kimberly and me. Mom's eyes filled with tears. The first time was a check from your grandfather when you were 7. It was only $20, but we were behind on bills. I told myself I would replace it next month, but I never did. And then it got easier to rationalize. You didn't know about the money, so you wouldn't miss it. I was managing the household, so I deserved it. Terrible justifications that I somehow made myself believe. I listened silently, trying to reconcile this confession with the mother I thought I knew. When your father sent you that $5,000, Mom continued, I was in a panic. The credit card company had threatened to contact him about the overdue payments. I told myself I would just borrow the money briefly, pay off the most pressing debt, then replace it before you even knew it was gone. I was about to be evicted, Mom. I was skipping meals to save money. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. I know, and there's no excuse for what I did. None. Dr. Winters is helping me see that my addiction doesn't justify hurting the people I love. It explains my behavior but doesn't excuse it. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded check. This doesn't begin to make up for everything, but it's a start. It's the $5,000 your father sent, plus another $5,000 from the sale of some of my designer items. Dr. Winters is helping me liquidate my unnecessary possessions to begin making amends. I stared at the check she slid across the table. $10,000. It was a substantial amount, but money alone couldn't heal the broken trust. I appreciate this, I said carefully, but what I really need is to know this won't happen again, that you're genuinely committed to change. Mom straightened in her chair. I am. I'm attending therapy twice weekly. I've joined a support group for shopping addiction. Your father and I are seeing a financial counselor who has taken control of our accounts. I have a strict cash allowance now with receipts required for every purchase. And how does that make you feel? I asked, genuinely curious. Terrified, she admitted, humiliated, relieved, all at once. For the first time in decades, I'm not carrying the weight of secrets. It's both liberating and excruciating. I nodded, understanding that mix of emotions all too well. I don't expect instant forgiveness, Rachel. I know I've damaged our relationship in ways that may never fully heal, but I'm asking for a chance to prove over time that I can change, that I can be the mother you deserve. I considered her words carefully. The easy path would be to reject her outright, to nurture my anger and hurt. But the harder, more complicated truth was that I still loved my mother despite everything. I can't pretend everything is fine between us, I said finally. Trust is earned and you've got a lot of earning to do. But I'm willing to take small steps forward with boundaries. Anything, Mom said quickly? Whatever boundaries you need. First, complete transparency. No more secrets, financial or otherwise. Second, you continue therapy no matter how difficult it gets. Third, you make amends to Kimberly too, not just me. Mom nodded at each condition. Yes, to all of that. And whatever else you need. And one more thing, I added. I want us to attend family therapy together. Dad, you, me, and Kimberly. There are things that need to be said in a safe environment with a professional present. Of course, Mom agreed. I've already discussed this with Dr. Winters. She can recommend someone. I sat back, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and resolution. This isn't going to be quick or easy. You know that, right? I do, Mom said softly. But you're worth the work, Rachel. Our relationship is worth the work. I just hope I haven't realized that too late. For the first time since that fateful dinner, I felt a small glimmer of hope. Not for an immediate happy ending, but for the possibility of a new beginning built on honesty rather than appearances. It's not too late, I said, but the real work starts now. That evening, I called Dad to tell him about the meeting. He listened quietly as I recounted the conversation. "Do you think she's sincere?" he asked when I finished. "I do," I replied after a moment's reflection. "I think she's finally facing reality, and it's terrifying her. But she's doing it anyway. That counts for something." "It does," Dad agreed. "I've seen changes too. Small ones, but significant." "Are you and Mom? Will you stay together?" I asked hesitantly. Dad was silent for a long moment. "I don't know yet, Rachel. 30 years of marriage isn't something I can walk away from easily. But 30 years of deception isn't something I can simply forgive either. Like you said, we're taking small steps forward, with clear boundaries." "One day at a time," I murmured. "Exactly. And speaking of steps forward, Kimberly and I were talking. We'd like to have a family meeting this Sunday. Not a dinner, just a conversation. Would you be comfortable with that?" I thought about it. Yes, but I'd like to lead the conversation. There are things I need to say to all of you. "Of course," Dad said, sounding somewhat surprised. "It's your show." That Sunday, instead of our traditional dinner, we gathered in my parents' living room. Dad had ordered sandwiches from a local deli, deliberately casual compared to Mom's usual elaborate meals. Kimberly arrived shortly after I did, giving me a supportive hug before taking a seat. Mom entered last, carrying a tray of coffee mugs. She seemed nervous, her usual confidence absent. We all took our beverages in awkward silence until I cleared my throat. "Thank you all for coming." I began feeling strangely formal. I wanted us to meet because I think it's time we established some new family norms. The old ones clearly weren't working. I looked directly at my mother. "Mom, what you did was wrong. It hurt me, it hurt Kimberly, and it hurt Dad. But I also recognize that you're working to change, and that matters." Mom nodded, eyes downcast. "Dad," I continued, turning to him, "you've been my rock through this, and I appreciate everything you've done to make things right. But I need you to understand that your tendency to avoid conflict contributed to the situation. We all need to communicate better." Dad looked startled, but then nodded thoughtfully. "You're right. I've always hated confrontation, so I looked the other way too often." "And Kimberly," I said, turning to my sister, "you and I need to be honest with each other too. I've been hiding my struggles from you because I was embarrassed. That stops now." "Agreed," Kimberly said firmly. "No more pretending everything's fine when it isn't." I took a deep breath. If we're going to move forward as a family, I need 3 commitments from everyone. First, complete honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. Second, respect for boundaries. And third, a willingness to do the hard work of rebuilding trust. I looked around at my family, these complicated people I love despite everything. I'm not ready to pretend everything is fixed. It's not. But I am ready to start the process of healing if you all are. One by one, they nodded their agreement. Mom wiped away tears. Dad reached over to squeeze my hand. Kimberly gave me a small, encouraging smile. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a beginning, and sometimes that's enough. 6 months passed surprisingly quickly. Spring turned to summer, and with it came small but significant changes in all our lives. The most obvious change for me was my new apartment, a modest 1-bedroom in Ravenswood. It wasn't as trendy as my old place in Wicker Park, but it was clean, safe, and most importantly within my budget. After 2 months of intensive job hunting, I had landed a position as a communications specialist for a nonprofit organization focused on financial literacy. The irony wasn't lost on me. My salary wasn't impressive, but the work was meaningful, and the organization's mission resonated with my own recent experiences. Every Wednesday evening, I attended therapy with Dr. Carter, working through the complex emotions of betrayal, anger, and the slow process of rebuilding trust. Those sessions were often difficult, leaving me emotionally drained, but ultimately stronger. The family therapy sessions held twice monthly, with all four of us present, were even more challenging. Under the guidance of Dr. Winters, we learned to communicate honestly, to express hurt without attacking, and to listen without becoming defensive. Progress was slow and sometimes painful, but it was progress nonetheless. Mom had maintained her individual therapy and support group attendance. According to Dad, she hadn't made an unauthorized purchase in 5 months. Her designer clothes had been sold, the proceeds used to pay down debt and make restitution to Kimberly and me. She now dressed simply, shopped with a list, and kept meticulous records of every expenditure. Dad had taken control of their finances, but was working with Mom to gradually restore her involvement in a healthy, transparent way. They were still living together, though their relationship remained a work in progress. The separate bedrooms continued, but they had begun occasional date nights to reconnect as partners rather than just co-parents. Our Sunday family gatherings had resumed, though they looked different now. We rotated hosting duties among all four of us, with everyone contributing to the meal. Today was my turn to host, and as I set out the simple pasta salad and grilled chicken I had prepared, I reflected on how far we had come. The doorbell rang at exactly 2 o'clock. Dad was always punctual. He entered carrying a bottle of sparkling cider, giving me a warm hug. "The place looks great, Rachel," he said, glancing around my small but neatly arranged apartment. "Thanks, Dad. It feels like home now." Kimberly arrived next, bringing homemade garlic bread that filled the apartment with its aroma. She had been a steadfast support throughout the past months, offering both practical help and emotional understanding. Mom was the last to arrive, looking nervous, as she always did in these situations. She carried a small gift bag. "This is for you," she said, handing it to me. "Just a housewarming thing." Inside was a simple ceramic vase. Not expensive or elaborate, but thoughtful. "Thank you," I said sincerely. "It's perfect for the windowsill." We settled around my small dining table, passing dishes and making conversation. The initial awkwardness of these gatherings had gradually faded, replaced by a new kind of family dynamic. Not perfect, but real, in a way our previous interactions had never been. "I have some news," Dad announced as we began eating. "The accountant says we should be debt-free by the end of next year, ahead of the projected schedule." "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely pleased for them. The financial counselor had initially estimated a 3-year repayment plan for all of Mom's accumulated debt. "It's because of your mother's extra payments," Dad added, giving Mom an approving glance. "She's been selling craft items online and putting all the proceeds toward the debt." Mom blushed slightly. "It's just beaded jewelry and knitted scarves. Nothing fancy. But it helps, and the creative outlet is good for me. Dr. Winters says it's a healthy replacement for the shopping high." "I bought one of her scarves for my assistant's birthday," Kimberly added. "It was actually really nice." The pride in Mom's eyes at this simple compliment was noticeable. She had been working hard to find identity and self-worth outside of material possessions. As the meal continued, the conversation turned to my new job and its focus on financial literacy. "We're developing a program for high schools," I explained, "teaching basic budgeting, understanding credit-saving strategies, all the things I wish I'd learned earlier." "That's so important," Dad said enthusiastically. "The number of young adults I see in financial trouble because they never learned these basics is staggering." "Actually," I said, "I was hoping you might consider being a guest speaker for some of our workshops, Dad. Your expertise would be invaluable." Dad looked genuinely touched. "I'd be honored." And Mom, I added cautiously, if you ever feel comfortable sharing your experience, it could really help others who are struggling with similar issues. Mom looked startled. You think people would want to hear from someone like me after what I did? Recovery stories are powerful, I said. Your journey could help someone else recognize their own problem before it goes as far as yours did. Mom considered this. Let me think about it. I'm not sure I'm ready yet, but maybe someday. After dessert, Dad and Kimberly offered to clean up, giving Mom and me a rare moment alone on my small balcony. We sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, watching the neighborhood below. I'm proud of you, Rachel, Mom said suddenly. I turned to her surprised. For what? For everything. Your new job, this apartment, the way you've handled all of this. She gestured vaguely, encompassing our family situation. You've shown more strength and grace than I would have in your position. I've had my moments, I admitted. Dr. Carter has heard plenty of angry rants. Mom smiled sadly. As she should. Your anger was justified. Another silence fell between us, but it felt different now. Less tense, more contemplative. Can I ask you something, I said finally. Something I've been wondering about for months. Mom nodded cautiously. When did the shopping become more important than your relationship with me? Was there a specific moment, or was it gradual? Mom considered the question carefully. It was never more important, Rachel. That's what makes addiction so insidious. In the moment of taking that money, I wasn't choosing shopping over you. I was responding to an overwhelming compulsion while telling myself a story that made it okay, that I would fix it before you knew, that it wasn't really hurting anyone. She looked at me directly. But to answer your question more honestly, I think it started when you were in middle school. You were becoming your own person, pulling away from me naturally as adolescents do. The shopping filled that emotional void. The more distant you became, the more I shopped. It was a terrible cycle. I had never considered that my own normal development might have contributed to her behavior. Not that it excused anything, but it helped me understand. Thank you for being honest, I said. Mom reached over hesitantly and took my hand. I know I can never fully repair what I broke, Rachel, but I want you to know that I'm committed to trying for as long as it takes. For the first time in many months, I squeezed her hand back without reservation. When everyone had gone and I was alone again, I sat on my couch reflecting on the day. 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined hosting a peaceful family gathering. The betrayal had seemed too enormous, the hurt too deep. Yet here we were slowly rebuilding. Not the perfect family we had pretended to be, but something more authentic. A family that could acknowledge flaws, set boundaries, and still choose to love each other through the process of healing. My phone buzzed with a text from Kimberly. Proud of you, sis. Today was good. I smiled, typing back. It really was. The journey wasn't over. Trust once shattered rebuilds slowly with occasional setbacks along the way. There would still be difficult conversations, painful memories, and moments of doubt. But I had learned something valuable through this experience. Resilience isn't about never falling. It's about finding the strength to rise again. And sometimes, the deepest wounds, when properly healed, become the source of our greatest strength. My mother's betrayal had forced me to confront my own unhealthy patterns around money and independence. It had strengthened my relationship with my father and sister. It had led me to a career where I could help others avoid similar pitfalls. It wasn't the path I would have chosen, but it was the path that had brought me here. And looking around my modest apartment, feeling a sense of genuine peace for the first time in years, I realized that here was exactly where I needed to be. Have you ever experienced a betrayal from someone you trusted completely? How did you handle it? Was forgiveness possible, or did you need to create permanent boundaries? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that healing is possible even after the deepest betrayals. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes our greatest growth comes from our most painful experiences.